time is 11:38 p.m. I am starting my first recording of the book 100 Cases of Survival After Death. I came across this book in a small bookshop in the town of Cromford some months ago when I was travelling and have been glued to it since. It is a very special book. It was compiled by a man called A.T. Baird, who has this massive collection of psychological and paranormal research trying to prove the existence of something after death. These accounts, they span something like 200 years. It's incredible, a real gem of a find, and so now I'm sharing it here. My hope is that, well, no, I'm not even really too sure. In any case, it's probably best if we just begin. The only thing I should mention is that SPR stands for the Society of Psychical Research. They were founded in the 1800s and were one of the groups of people looking into this kind of thing. I think that's referenced some point in here. So, now you know. Yes, let's get started. The second account detailed in the book is known as the Sarawak case, and it goes as follows. My wife, since deceased, had a brother residing at Sarawak, and at the time to which I refer he was staying with the Raja, Sir James Brooke. The following is an extract from the second volume of The Raja of Sarawak by Gertrude L. Jacob, page 238. Mr. Wellington, my wife's brother, was killed in a brave attempt to defend Mrs. Middleton and her children. The Chinese, it appears, taking Mr. Wellington for the Raja's son, struck off his head. And now for the dream. I was awakened one night by my wife, who started from her sleep terrified by the following dream. She saw her headless brother standing at the foot of the bed, with his head lying on a coffin by his side. I did my best to console my wife, who continued to be much distressed for some considerable time. At length she fell asleep, again to be wakened by a similar dream. In the morning, and for several days after, she constantly referred to her dream and anticipated sad news of her brother. And now comes the strangest part of the story. When this news reached England, I computed approximately the time and found it coincided with the memorable night to which I have referred. This next recollection comes from the Haunted House section of the book. The name of the place has been redacted, so case number 14 is simply known as the D case, and it goes as follows. In relating simply what I saw one July morning in the year 1873, I will first describe the room in which I saw it. It is a bedroom, with a window at either end, a door and a fireplace at opposite sides. The room is on the upper story of a house some miles from the city of D. One morning, opening my eyes, I saw right before me the figure of a woman, stooping down and apparently looking at me. Her head and shoulders were wrapped in a common grey woolen shawl. Her arms folded and were also wrapped, as if for warmth, in the shawl. I looked at her, in my horror, and dared not to cry out lest I might move the awful thing to speech or action. After what may have only been seconds, the duration of this I cannot judge, she raised herself and went backwards towards the window, stood at the table, and gradually vanished. And now I could take my oath that I did not mention this circumstance to either my brother or the servant, as, had I done so, the latter, whom we valued, might have left. Exactly a fortnight afterwards, I noticed my brother was out of sorts at breakfast time. "I've had a horrid nightmare," he said. "I saw it early this morning as distinctly as I see you. A villainous-looking old hag, with her head and arms wrapped up in a cloak, stooping over me." "Oh, Henry," I said, "I saw the same thing a fortnight ago." He answered, "Why did you not tell me?" "I was afraid you would laugh at me," I said. "Oh, this is no laughing matter," he said, "for it has quite upset me." about 4 years later, a boy of 4 or 5 years of age, left alone in the drawing room, came out pale and trembling, and said to my sister, "Who is that old woman that went upstairs?" My sister tried to convince him that there was no old woman, and though they searched every room in the house, the child did maintain that the old woman did go upstairs. A gentleman, with whom we became acquainted in the neighbourhood, started when we first told him of what we had seen, and asked had we never heard that a woman had been killed in that house many years previously, and that it was said to be haunted. The witnesses in this case were all still alive at the time it was published in the Proceedings of the SPR, and known personally to Professor Henry Sidgwick and Sir William F. Barrett. This next account comes from the Apparitions section of the book. It is the first one in that section. It is case number 20 and is known as the Brougham case. In December 1799, Lord Brougham, then 21 years of age, was journeying in Sweden with some friends. He says, "We set out for Gothenburg, determining to make way for Norway. About 1 o'clock in the morning, arriving at a decent inn, we decided to stop for the night. Tired with the cold of yesterday, I was glad to take advantage of a hot bath before I turned in, and here a most remarkable thing happened to me. So remarkable that I must tell the story from the beginning. After I left the high school, I went with G, my most intimate friend, to attend the classes in the university. There was no divinity class, but we frequently in our walks discussed and speculated upon many grave subjects, among others on the immortality of the soul and on a future state. This question and the possibility, I will not say of ghosts walking, but of the dead appearing to the living, were subjects of much speculation. And we actually committed to the folly of drawing up an agreement written in our blood, to the effect that whichever of us died first should appear to the other, and thus solve any doubts we had entertained of the life after death. After we had finished our classes at the college, G went to India, having got an appointment there in the civil service. He seldom wrote to me, and after a lapse of a few years, I had almost forgotten him. Moreover, his family having little connection with Edinburgh, I seldom saw or heard anything of them or of him through them, so that all this schoolboy intimacy had died out, and I had nearly forgotten his existence. I had taken, as I have said, a warm bath, and while lying in it and enjoying the comfort of the heat after the late freezing I had undergone, I turned my head round, looking towards the chair on which I had deposited my clothes, as I was about to get out of the bath. On the chair sat G, looking calmly at me. How I got out of the bath I know not, but on recovering my senses I found myself sprawling on the floor. The apparition, or whatever it was, that had taken the likeness of G, had disappeared. This vision produced such a shock that I had no inclination to talk about it, or speak about it even to Stuart, but the impression it made upon me was too vivid to be easily forgotten, and so strongly was I affected by it that I have written down the whole story, with the date, December 19, and all the particulars as they are now fresh before me. No doubt I had fallen asleep, and that the appearance presented so distinctly to my eyes was a dream. I cannot for a moment doubt, yet for years I have had no communication with G, nor had there been anything to recall him to my recollection. Nothing had taken place during our Swedish travels either connected with G or with India, or with anything related to him or any member of his family. I recollected quickly enough our old discussion and the bargain we had made. I could not discharge from my mind the impression that G must have died, and that his appearance to me was to be received by me as proof of a future state. Yet all the while I felt convinced that the whole was a dream, and so painfully vivid, so unfading was the impression that I could not bring myself to talk of it, or to make the slightest allusion to it. Lord Brougham afterwards wrote that, soon after my return to Edinburgh, there arrived a letter from India announcing G's death, and stating that he had died on December 19. This will be the final case of this sitting. It comes from the Deathbed Visions section of the book, and is case number 38, otherwise known as the Edward case. It is short but poignant. This case was vouched for by Mr. Hensley Wedgwood, who contributed to The Spectator many years ago. A young girl, a near connection of mine, was dying of consumption. She had lain for some days in a prostrate condition, taking no notice of anything, when she opened her eyes, and looking upwards said slowly, "Susan, and Jane, and Helen," as if recognizing the presence of 3 sisters who had previously died of the same disease. Then, after a short pause, she added, "And Edward too," naming a brother, then supposed to be well and alive in India, as if surprised at seeing him in the company. She said no more, and sank shortly afterwards. In the course of the post, letters were received from India, which stated that Edward had died as a result of an accident 1 or 2 weeks previous to the death of his sister in England. This incident was related to me by an elder sister who nursed the dying girl, and was present at the bedside at the time of the apparent vision. That's very much all I can handle for one night. I don't believe in a life after death. I don't believe in ghosts or spirits or anything like that. But when you spend as much time going over these cases as I have, you start to question. That's it. I'm going to end the recording there.